Well, it's time for another update. In fact, this time around it was a double whammy with two smaller point updates within a few weeks, getting us to 10.5.4 with Final Cut Pro, 5.5.3 with Motion, and 4.5.4 with Compressor as of today. The second update just being a small bug fix, so we'll really only be talking about the first, which was 10.5.3. There's not quite as much to talk about as my last video, so let's take a look. Hey there, Robin here from Post Professionals. We of course want to first talk about Final Cut Pro, where some very interesting new functionality was added, such as column sets, enhanced search criteria, and more. Of course, we want to talk about Motion and Compressor as well. And just on a side note, by the way, while some of my videos here on the channel might appear to be very update specific, don't think they don't contain any very useful tips and tricks that are still valid and useful to this day. For example, my aforementioned last, rather long update video where I talk about things like proxy workflow, converting for social media, and import of 3D models into Motion, and even how to use those models to make a custom template for Final Cut, and much more. Link up here and down in the description. So check out the channel if you want even more info, tips, and tricks surrounding Final Cut Motion and Compressor. If you find this interesting and or helpful, maybe do me a solid and let me know by leaving me a thumbs up or even hitting the subscription button and notification bell, which really helps the channel so I can continue producing all the free content. And definitely leave me a comment and let me know what you liked or even disliked, so I know what I can improve in the future. But enough of all that. Let's check out what's new in Final Cut this time around. First off, there are new custom column sets. Metadata is a very useful thing when it comes to media organization, something that Final Cut Pro can already do exponentially better than any other video editor. So those who have missed access to more metadata in Final Cut Pro's list view just got what they need and then some. Starting with Final Cut Pro 10.5.3, we can save any combination of column settings as a new custom column set. We can even easily copy column sets to another computer to share them with friends and colleagues so that the same column sets are available in their browser. Though, to be exact, the basic functionality isn't all that new, since it looks and functions identical to the metadata views editor, which we can find under the Info Inspector, only that this obviously only changes the metadata information shown in the inspector. Here, we can even add our own custom metadata field should I be missing one that doesn't already exist, or it does exist, but my camera doesn't write the needed metadata to the clips and I can't change it after the fact. Say, for example, the lens that was used. So for demonstration purposes, I'll make a new one and name it Custom Lens Info, and for entering missing lens metadata. Click OK, and with that it's added to the currently selected list, and I can enter Canon 50mm, for example. Of course, you might be wondering how that's helpful or even relevant to the new column sets. I'll in fact show something really cool in just a moment. So until now, if we switched to list view in the event browser and then right-clicked on the columns bar at the top, we were presented with a list of a fair amount of columns of general importance that we could choose from. Selecting one from the list would show or hide it when selected, depending on its previous state, obviously. But looking at this list, I think we can see that there are a lot of options missing for showing various metadata that any given media could have. Say, for example, information regarding raw metadata. So options such as ISO, raw conversion, or temperature. Or maybe you work with VR material a lot and need to quickly know what your material's cube layout is or if it's been stitched. Well, until now, essentially all of that information was only available in the Info Inspector when your media was selected in the event. But even then, we often had to find the right display mode, settings, for example, to get to the information such as which camera LUT was applied. But that's not terribly practical if we need that information when working with a larger number of files. And maybe we don't even want all that information all the time and constantly having to manually hide and show columns as needed. No. That's where the column sets come in. Starting with Final Cut Pro 10.5.3, if we are in the list view and right-click the columns bar, we're greeted with several new options. At the top, we still have the auto sizing options for the columns and the 4 hide show commands. But below that, there is an all-new section that pertains to the column sets. At the top, I can always find any and all sets listed that have been saved. In this case, there's only the default set, which, much like the default keyboard commands, can't be changed aside from showing or hiding a column from view. Below that, I can save the current state of the columns as a custom column set. Let me do that, and we can take a look at what options we're given. I'm asked to give my new set a name, and I'll just call it raw, because I want to set up a set for quick and easy access to any column relevant for working with ProRes raw material, and click Save. Now if I right-click the columns bar once again, I can see a check mark in front of my raw column set. Only problem is that I still don't see any columns that show any metadata relevant to raw material that I can choose to show. Reason being that not all available columns are active for selection by default. I need to tell Final Cut which columns I want available for this set. Which those are, I can decide by selecting the Edit Available Columns command. With that, I'm presented with the now new Column Set Editor window. But again, for anyone that's ever edited the metadata view for the Info Inspector, this isn't all that new. On the left, I have a list of all currently available column sets, so just the default and my new custom raw set. If I wanted, I could also create an all-new column set with the pop-up menu at the bottom left, where I can also either duplicate a set, maybe as a starting point for a new set, for example, or delete a selected set. On the right, I currently see every and all columns available to me since I have all properties selected in the pop-up menu above it, with an origin column and a short description for most on the right. Oddly, most of the descriptions actually run out of the side of the window. The window, which is unfortunately not resizable at this point. So if I want to actually see the entire description of a property, I simply need to hover over the description for a few seconds, and the entire description will appear as a tooltip. If I scroll through the list, I can see there are many new metadata columns to choose from. So many, in fact, that having to scroll through the list to find what I'm looking for is pretty tedious, if not pointless. In which case, I can either filter the properties that are displayed via the pop-up menu above, to have it show me only the video properties, or maybe just camera properties, or EXIF data that until now was relatively hidden in the inspector and hard to find, or even just the ones that are currently selected for this set. Going back to all properties, I can also go to the bottom of the window and choose to have all the currently displayed columns checked or unchecked, meaning that any and all checked columns will also show up in the right-click in the list view of the event for me to activate and deactivate for the active column set. In fact, I'll uncheck all of the current ones to start with a fresh set. Next to that, I also have a search field at the top right. And since I'm looking for all the relevant columns for raw material, and there is no filter for that in the pop-up menu, I can simply enter the search term raw. That gives me a list of all the metadata columns that contain the word raw, be it in the property name or the description. For these, I'll just select Check All from the pop-up menu. But in addition, I also want to be able to see the codecs used. So I'll enter codec into the search field and then select 2 of the 3 resulting properties. I'll just select codecs and proxy codecs since original codecs would be redundant. Then I'll enter bit as my search term so I can add the audio bitrate, bit depth of the image, and video bitrate. Then media to get media duration. And enter size to add the frame size information as well. And finally, I can show the very cool little thing I can do now too that I was hinting at after creating my custom metadata field for the inspector. If I enter lens as my search term, we can see that my own custom metadata field is also included here since all metadata fields are listed, and I can select it as well to have it be shown in my column set. So I can create my own columns and enter whatever information is important and useful to me that I might not otherwise have access to. That's pretty cool and powerful if you ask me, and I'm not aware of any other app that offers that option. If you know of one, let me know down in the comments. And when I'm done, I simply click OK. And there we go. now I have a raw column set that I can easily and quickly switch to if and when I'm working with raw material. If I want the columns in a different order, I can simply click and drag them to whatever position I like to prioritize the most needed information by moving them to the front or back. These positions are even automatically saved to the active column set, so I don't have to constantly reorganize everything after restarting Final Cut. The column settings saved include available columns, column order, column width, column visibility, and custom metadata fields. And I can even change certain settings such as the raw to log conversion or ISO directly in the list, even for multiple clips at a time by selecting them. So no more need for tedious hunting down these parameters in the settings info window should I need to change them or just check what they're set to. One just needs to keep in mind that any changes made to an active column set, be it column visibility or order, for example, are automatically saved, which can be a good or a bad thing, something I haven't yet decided for myself. Last but not least, after I've saved a column set, or if I'd just like to know where to put one that I maybe have received from someone else, I can right-click the column bar again and select Reveal in Finder. That opens the folder in which column sets are saved. From here, I can copy a set in or out. In fact, I've put together a few sets that you can simply download and install this way if you like. I've basically just mirrored the available metadata in the various info window panels, such as the basic, settings, and MXF panels. With them installed, you can use them to quickly access all the information that you'd normally have to click and dig through the inspector for, and can even change a lot of the settings direct in the browser. Or you can simply use them as a starting point for your own column sets. Whoever's interested can simply download them from the link up here in the corner or the one in the description. If that's useful, let me know in the comments and maybe give me a thumbs up. Moving on to the enhanced search. As the name implies, it's an enhanced search, so unlike many appear to suggest, there's technically nothing new about the search. It's just been made more specific and convenient. For example, some seem to think that you couldn't actually search for missing media until now, which you could. And while it's anything but obvious, nor is it documented as far as I know, you simply needed to enter the search term missing, or even just miss, into the search field. Et voila! All missing media was and still is listed. But again, the search is enhanced, so there is now a more useful way of doing this. But first, let's look at a few other changes. What hasn't changed is that clicking on the little magnifying glass at the top of the browser still shows and hides the search field, as well as the small button to the right, which toggles the filter HUD. The first thing that has changed is that we now have an additional pop-up hiding behind the magnifying glass to the left of the search field, indicated by this drop-down symbol. Clicking on it shows us that we now have the option to have the search term entered used for any and all text that may exist, the only option we had until now, or we can now limit our search to notes, names, or markers. In other words, until now, if I entered a search term, for example, dogs, then the search results would return any clip or project that had that search term in its note, name, or marker. Now I can limit those to any one of those. So while at this point several clips are listed, if I limit the search to notes, the results change, because only this one clip has the search term in its notes. And an icon also appears in front of my search term to signal the fact that it is being filtered to just one category. The same goes for switching it to names only, or to markers only. An easily understandable concept, I would say. As far as the ability to search for missing media goes, that's where the enhancements of the filter HUD come into play. Clicking on the little symbol to open it, it looks unchanged at first glance. The changes are to the search criteria that we can add to our search pipeline, also known as weighted searches, which we still do with the menu at the top right. Clicking on it, we see that we no longer only have 10, but rather 12 filters to choose from. The two new filters being markers and media representation. I'd say that using the markers filter is also pretty self-explanatory, only that here I can use it in conjunction with additional criteria. I could, for example, use the search for all the clips that have a marker with the same name. Say, for example, if I had several takes of someone reading or saying the same thing and just want to see all the clips with that take, assuming, of course, I marked them accordingly. Or maybe I just want to see all the clips that have to-do markers that need taking care of, no matter how they have been named. So with this, I can find clips by markers, including descriptive text and whether to-do markers are complete or incomplete, something that I've only been able to do in the timeline via the index window until now. If we add the media representation filter as well, we can see we now have the aforementioned ability to filter by the availability or unavailability of the three media types, be it our original, optimized, or proxy media. Again, something we were technically able to do until now, just not as conveniently. Nor was this anything you could include in a smart collection, for example. In other words, if I cancel out of this, right-click my library or event, depending on where I want it, and add a new smart collection, name it Proxies, double-click it and add the media representation filter, set it to Proxy and Missing, then close the HUD, I can now quickly and easily see which of my clips may be missing a proxy representation that I need to be able to send a library elsewhere at the smallest possible size, for example. In which case, I can simply select them all, right-click, and choose Transcode Media to generate the missing proxy files. Something I could do for the original and optimized media as well, of course. Or even add a smart collection that shows me which clips have or are missing all three, or any combination in between. And that almost does it for what's new in Final Cut Pro, starting with version 10.5.3. Unless I missed something important, in which case let us know in the comments. Oh, and the icon for the blade tool ironically isn't a blade anymore. It's a pair of scissors. This, of course, being nothing more than a cosmetic change, not the least bit a functional one. But despite that fact, it of course still hasn't stopped an endless barrage of threads from popping up in as many forums and groups, all expressing their complete outrage over this change, as if it's transformed everything. Since I only ever use Command B, I probably wouldn't even have noticed for years to come either way. But hey, if that's all there is to complain about in Final Cut Pro, I'd say we're golden. Moving on to Motion. In Motion, there is nothing new, other than stability and performance improvements, so there's that. Unless someone discovers anything I missed, in which case I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Switching to Compressor. With Compressor, on the other hand, a lot has comparatively happened, which is nice to see. Here we've gotten things like batch status notifications, which lets us receive notifications for completed, failed, or canceled encoded batches, whereby, to be honest, I never even realized those weren't previously available, maybe because I turned most notifications off anyway. We have also been given the ability to modify the start timecode of a source clip or audio file by simply selecting our job, then going into the timing section and adjusting the starting timecode as needed. After exporting, we can see the new timecode, for example, in the QuickTime Player by clicking on the timecode indicator. Or, of course, by skimming the new clip in Final Cut. 4.5.3 also adds the ability to choose the color palette and dithering algorithm to minimize the file size of PNGs and GIFs, whether animated or not. For this, I can use any given image or clip, then apply any image sequence preset to it, for example, one of the animated image presets under Motion Graphics, and under General, set the image type to either GIF or PNG. Here, I now have a couple of new options. First, the ability to select a color palette. This setting limits the colors used in the transcoded file. If set to not indexed, all available colors are used. Below that, I can choose from a global or local palette. Local uses a new color palette for each frame. Global uses a shared color palette across all frames. The latter method involves 2 passes, therefore it takes longer as well. The first pass analyzes each of the frames, generating a common palette. The second pass encodes each frame using that common palette. Below that are 3 options for color dithering, which becomes available when a color palette is set to any number of colors. Dithering gives the illusion of colors that may not be present in the actual color palette. For example, a pattern of red and green can be used to give the impression of yellow in the image. Set to none, obviously, no dithering is applied. Floyd-Steinberg uses the industry standard Floyd-Steinberg dithering algorithm, and Sierra 2 uses the Sierra 2 line dithering algorithm, which may produce a smoother image depending on the source. With version 4.5.3, we are now also able to resize vertical video to other vertical frame sizes and square video to other square frame sizes with new up to presets in the inspector. But after selecting one of these, you'll see that the aspect ratio in the viewer stays the same. In other words, you need to be careful not to confuse this with the other new feature in Compressor that resembles Smart Conforming in Final Cut Pro. Because using the video properties frame size setting would merely squeeze or stretch your video from its current aspect ratio to the one you chose in the frame size. So in this case, the rendered file would merely be a horizontally squeezed version of the entire content of the clip. If you want to have nearly the same conforming as in Final Cut, then you need to resize your video to vertical and square aspect ratios using new presets for cropping and padding further down in the inspector. I say nearly the same conforming as in Final Cut because while Compressor can perform the same crop, seen here, if I, for example, choose 9:16 or 1:1 from the cropping pop-up, you only ever get the exact middle section of whatever clip you're cropping. So really only useful for a clip that actually already has been edited to show everything relevant in the exact middle subsection. Otherwise, in my opinion, it clearly makes much more sense to use Final Cut for the Smart Conform, and if one insists on using Compressor for rendering, using Final Cut's Send to Compressor command. And last but certainly not least, Compressor can now embed audio description tracks when encoding a variety of video formats, meaning you can create video content for people who are blind or low vision by adding descriptive audio tracks to your clip that can be turned on and off as needed. You can embed descriptive audio tracks, like language tracks, in anything from a QuickTime Movie to MXF. Unfortunately, though, this can't actually be done via Final Cut's Send to Compressor command, but rather needs to be done with separately rendered files. In other words, when you export a project that has your regular audio as well as an audio description track in it, you would first export the project with both video and audio with either the description track itself or its role disabled, assuming you gave it its own role. After that, you need to reactivate the audio description track or role and export the entire thing again as an audio-only file. In other words, you want to end up with two files. One video file with all the audio except the audio description track, and one audio-only file with all the audio, including the audio description track. With these, I can then simply open Compressor and drag my video file into the window to create a new job. Now I simply select the job itself, and in the inspector, under Audio Properties, there's a new button for importing a descriptive audio track file. After clicking it and choosing my newly exported audio file, I see the additional audio track in the window below with the appropriate AD labeled behind it, as well as a checkbox in front of it should I want to double check everything with the audio description track turned on. Now I just need to go up to the File Properties section and choose the appropriate language and country, after which I can choose whichever preset I like to apply to the job and then click the Start Batch button to render it out. After it's finished, I can open it in the QuickTime player or any other player that recognizes audio description tracks as such. And in the playback bar, I can click the Subtitles button and see my AD labeled audio description track listed, and just need to select it to activate it for playback. Simple as that. By the way, if you import this file back into Final Cut Pro, the audio description track is of course imported as well, only it's automatically disabled. To hear it in your project, you merely need to go into the audio configuration section of the audio inspector to re-enable it if needed. So, while I know that many, as always, were looking for all sorts of other new features, I personally think this is still yet another solid update with useful, albeit smaller improvements. And I can't wait to see what comes next, especially if and when a bigger update arrives. Whatever it is, I'll of course be covering it here as well, and would love to see you back. I hope you could learn a little something, and all the information I was able to conjure up, or maybe the column set download was of use to you. In which case, As I've said, let me know what you think down in the comments, and maybe treat me to a thumbs up, or even better, subscribe if you haven't already, to help the channel and not miss any future tutorials. Of course, there is already a lot of additional information hiding here on the channel surrounding Final Cut and the others. For example, my last video here, and another one that YouTube thinks you'd love to see as well, so maybe give it a shot. But for now, I much appreciate your taking the time to tune in, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks, and take care.